Hey everybody, it's Sunday, so it's story time. I have a really special guest with me today because of the book that we're reading. I have been waiting to read this book like basically a year since I started doing these videos at the beginning of quarantine. We've got this awesome book here at Proust called The Water Dragon, a Chinese Legend. It's retold in English and Chinese and is by Li Jiang. So I've been waiting to read it until we actually got water dragons in, and luckily we did. About 2 weeks ago, we got in 7 baby Chinese water dragons. These have always been one of my favorite lizards to take care of. Although they don't look very showy right now, he's kind of dullish green, not a lot of color on him. As water dragons get bigger, they become full of all kinds of awesome colors. They can get about as long as my arm, and that includes with their tail. And they become bright green, fluorescent green with flashes of orange and yellow and red and blue. The males get this big crest that goes across the back of their head and these big jowls. They get some yellow underneath their armpits. They become a very cool, showy lizard. And they can also be very personable. As long as you acclimate them and get them used to people, then they end up being a very cool pet. But because of their size and because of how they live in the wild, they require some very interesting and unique setups. So as you can see, he's hanging on to my thumb. These guys are very good climbers. They're also very fast runners, and they are excellent swimmers. They have this long tail, and this tail helps with many things. So for climbing, it helps him keep his balance. When he's on the ground and running, if he needs it for defense, he can whip it and hit an animal that may be coming after him, and it hurts a lot. It's like cracking a whip. When he's underwater, it works like a rudder. And he'll sit there and flip it back and forth, and it pushes him through. In fact, one of my favorite things with these guys when I've had them before is filling up a big bathtub with water, putting the dragon in there, and watching him climb up the shower curtain, and then dive down in the water, and they tuck their arms in, and then they just use that tail like a rudder, and they swim through. So a really fun thing that's a good enrichment and a good food source for them is to throw something like some rosy reds in the water, maybe sprinkle some bugs on top of the water and watch them dive down and catch them. These guys can actually eat underwater. They'll catch their food, chomp them a little bit, and then come up to the surface and swallow them down. They can also sleep underwater. So they'll go under and then just put their nostrils just up above the surface so they can sit there and breathe. Now, these guys are listed as vulnerable out in the wild for many different reasons. Climate change is always the big push on why we're starting to see animals become vulnerable or even endangered. Another part is urbanization, where we're cutting into their natural habitat. These guys in particular are a jungle animal. They like living in lowland creeks and rivers, really dense forest. And as we're cutting all those forests down for timber, as we're blocking off the rivers to dam them up and create energy, we're actually taking away their habitat. So luckily, they breed pretty well in captivity. A lot of people breed them. So I always see that as a backup population. Sometimes, pet stores can get a little bit of flack for having animals. Zoos get a lot of flack for having animals, but in a way, we're actually preserving these animals. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to. They would just be free and out in the wild, and we wouldn't have to worry about anything happening to them. But unfortunately, our species is really good at destroying the planet. So there are those of us who love to try and save what we can. So on that note, to not get too depressing about it, but at least keep you aware of the plight of animals around the planet, we're just going to go ahead and start our story. The Water Dragon, a Chinese Legend, by Li Jiang. And I hope I'm saying that right. If any of my Asian friends happen to be watching, feel free to correct me. I don't mind being corrected at all, especially when it comes to different cultures and different languages. I'd actually prefer that you guys correct me. So I enjoy learning about other languages and cultures, and the better I can be educated on them, the better off we'll all be. And it'll make it easier for me to tell these stories. So, all right, here we go. Long ago in China, a little boy named Ah Bao lived in a small mountain village. Every day, Ah Bao went into the forest to collect wood. One day, while collecting wood, Ah Bao saw a shiny red stone lying in the grass. He picked it up, wondering what it could be. Also, one of my favorite things with this story is how the Chinese characters are in it. So we get a little bit of a language lesson, a written language lesson too. So, Bao put the shiny red stone in his rice crock. He immediately heard the rice rattling inside. Soon his crock was overflowing with rice. Bao now had more rice than he could ever eat. Bao set the shiny red stone in the money jar. The coins inside the jar started rattling too. Soon the jar was overflowing with coins. Bao now also had more money than he could ever spend. The shiny red stone must be magical. When his neighbors were out of rice, Bao filled their rice crocks with the magic power of the red stone. When his neighbors were out of money, Bao gave them the money made by the magic power of the red stone. But ever since Bao found the magic stone, it had stopped raining. In time, the rivers dried up and the crops died. Bao placed the magic stone in his water bucket, hoping that bucket would overflow with water. To his surprise, the magic stone absorbed all the water in the bucket instead. How can we live without water, he thought. That night, Bao dreamed of a white water dragon dancing in the clouds, showering the land with much needed water. Early the next morning, Bao decided to search for the water dragon. He packed food in the magic stone and set off. Some days later, Bao met a giant snake blocking the road at the foot of a huge mountain. Do you know where I can find the water dragon? Bao asked. If you move the rock off my tail, I will tell you where he is, the snake replied. Bao found a branch and lifted the rock off the snake's tail. The giant snake gave Bao a piece of his skin and said, "Boy, this will be very useful to you on your journey. The water dragon that you are looking for lives in the far east. Be careful, because you will meet a greedy red monster along the way." Bao thanked the giant snake for his snakeskin and continued his journey towards the east. He came to a nearly dry riverbed where he noticed a carp swimming in a pool of water. Do you know where I can find the water dragon? Bao asked. If you move me to the well over there, I will tell you where he is, the fish replied. Bao scooped the carp out of the river with both hands and placed him in the well. The fish gave Bao a piece of his skin with many scales on it and said, "Boy, this will be very useful to you on your journey. The water dragon that you are looking for lives in the far east. Be careful, because you will meet a greedy red monster along the way." Bao thanked the fish for his scales and set off once again. Soon he was walking through a forest and came across a deer whose antlers were stuck in a tree. Do you know where I can find the water dragon? Bao asked. If you remove my antlers, I will tell you where he is, the deer replied. Bao took his axe and removed the antlers from the deer. The deer gave Bao his antlers and said, "Boy, this will be very useful to you on your journey. The water dragon that you are looking for lives in the far east. Be careful, because you will meet a greedy red monster along the way." Bao thanked the deer for his antlers and continued on his journey. Soon he came to a high cliff. There, Bao met two eagles. "Do you know where I can find the water dragon?" Bao asked. "If you can take my child to our nest at the top of the cliff, I will tell you where he is," an eagle replied. Bao climbed the cliff and laid the little eagle in his nest. The eagle gave Bao a pair of claws and said, "Boy, this will be very useful to you on your journey. The water dragon that you're looking for lives in the far east. Be careful, because you will meet a greedy red monster on your journey." This little guy is really intrigued by the story. Bao thanked the eagles for the claws and continued his journey. It was not long before Bao met the red monster that everyone warned him about. Do you know where I can find the water dragon? Bao asked. You won't be able to find the dragon unless you have the Dragon Ball, the red monster replied sulkily. What does the Dragon Ball look like? Does it look like my red stone? Bao asked. Yes, that's it. You should not have it. Give it to me. The greedy red monster jumped at Bao to grab the Dragon Ball. Knowing that he would not be able to defeat the monster, Bao ran as fast as he could. I will eat you up if you run away, the red monster shouted as he chased Bao to the edge of the cliff. If I lose this Dragon Ball, I will never find the water dragon, Bao thought to himself. He quickly swallowed the Dragon Ball and jumped off the cliff. Bao landed in a deep pool of water at the base of the cliff. After swimming the shore, Bao felt extremely thirsty. He started to drink from the pool of water and emptied it in seconds. Still, he was thirsty. Bao rushed to the East China Sea and started to drink the seawater. Bao kept drinking and drinking until he was no longer thirsty. All of a sudden, Bao's body was wrapped in the snakeskin. The deer's antlers were attached to his head. His back was covered with the scales from the fish. His hands and feet were replaced by the claws from the eagles, and his eyes became red and shiny like the Dragon Ball. He flew into the sky, dancing in the clouds. Then he swooped down over the thirsty fields, spraying water as he went. Bao had turned into the water dragon. The water dragon showered on the dry earth until it turned green again. That's the legend told of the kind water dragon, who was really just a little boy named Bao. The end. So that was a really, really cool book about the legend of the water dragon and how a dry, arid land got its greenery returned to it. So, if you would like to check this book out, I highly suggest it. It gives some cool information about the author at the very end, and also a little bit more information about the water dragon. I love stories like this that tell folklore. I've read some African folklore, I've read some Latina folklore, and now some Chinese folklore. So if you guys have any suggestions, I'm more than up for it. I love this kind of stuff. So we'll give you our up close and personal look at our little water dragon, who seems completely enamored with the story and also more than content just sitting on my hand, because he's a good little guy. There we go. Want your chin scratched? Yeah? So, do you want to go up high? You want to be like Obi-Wan? Get the high ground? There we go. Just like most lizards, they'll like to sit up high. That way they can kind of see everything and survey it. So, hope everybody had a good night, and we'll see you next time.